You folks should be good to go ahead and start. Everything's recording and up and running, I think.
We'll call this meeting to order. Anybody would like to volunteer for an opening prayer?
I'll do it.
David?
Let's pray. Dear Lord, we just want to thank you for this beautiful day and for the sunshine we've been graced with today. We just ask that you be with us as we move through our agenda, that we do so with wisdom and discretion. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Take attendance.
I can take attendance if that works for you folks. Ken Pitt,
Here.
Georgia Smees,
Here.
Roger Noble,
Here.
Teresa Wall McDonald, she's here, but I don't know if she's on. Is Clayton there today? I don't see him.
No, Clayton's not here today, unless he's
Okay,
on
then
remote.
Did I get everyone? I think I missed someone on the end there. I just can't tell who it is.
Craig Adams.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a quorum. 1.3 first item on the agenda is to introduce James Frakes. Ethan.
Board members, it's my pleasure today to introduce Mr. James Frakes. He started Monday this week. He is getting a lot of opportunity to learn, the hands-on experience, and we originally planned to have him come up here to the podium. He's taking the driver's seat right here, so wait till you guys get situated.
I'll share that with you. We can share our stuff.
Sorry, no problem. James, if you have a second, I'm gonna drag you up here and let you say hello to the Flathead Water Management Board.
Thank you, Ethan. Hello, board. I'm James Frakes. I'm super excited to be here and working with you all. Just a super quick background about myself. I just recently graduated from the University of Montana. I got my master's in ecology and evolution, and all my research is about aquatic insects. And I'm really excited to be working with you all, and I'm passionate about water. So looking forward to developing a relationship with each of you. Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Introduce Eric Hall and Amanda Spencer with CSKT. Melissa.
Good afternoon, board. It's my pleasure to introduce Eric Hull, Hull. We spell his last name. He is new with the Natural Resource Department of the Tribes and working with Seth in his program for water. He has a counterpart, Amanda Spencer, who could not be here today, but we look forward to introducing her at the next meeting. I'll let Eric talk a little bit about himself.
Just a pleasure to be here and look forward to working with you all. I'll be one of two water rights specialists at the NRD for the tribes. This is my first week, so had a lot of water ponds, been inundated, and things from the fire hose, all that kind of stuff in the first week. So I had lots of reading to catch up on things, but getting a good handle on it. Look forward to learning from you all as well.
Good to meet you. And board, I should say, Amanda Spencer is a former student of mine, and she's remarkable. So the CSKT is rocking, so good job.
Of course, these minutes of this meeting are on the DMRC and CSKT websites for public review. Would like a motion, if possible, to adopt today's agenda.
Mr. Chair. Today on your agenda, I made two proposed changes to the agenda. They are in red text. One is I had inadvertently, in preparing your agenda, forgotten the first public comment and apologize for my error there. Second is underneath the water engineering report, we do have one board action item to consider purchasing awnings for the office.
So with Mr. Grace's additions, we have a motion to put.
I have a question first. So is the training on the agenda? Is that,
Sorry, just number one.
is the training an agenda item?
It is, item number 3, the work session is our training item built into this
Okay.
agenda today.
All right, thank you. All right, I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Motion is carried. Public comment. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I lost you guys there for a second.
There any public comment?
Thank you. I wasn't sure what you needed me to do. If anybody would like to make public comments, you can raise your hand. It looks like we only have one member of the public attending currently. But if you would like to make public comment, raise your hand and I can make it possible for you to speak. And I see no public comment.
Yeah. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is work session from 105 to 05, training for open meetings with Ashley Kent.
Excellent. I'm gonna introduce Ashley and tell her thanks for making the long drive to come and provide us with so much valuable training. And after that, I'll just get out of your way. Take this, appreciate being here.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the board and Ethan for inviting me up here to work with you guys today. I am Ashley Kent. I'm from the local government center, which is a part of MSU Extension. This is the type of work that we do in the center. We travel around the state, provide training, technical assistance, and research for local governments to help build their capacity. Basically, anything under state level, we help support. There are a whole 3.5 FTEs in our office, so we spend a lot of time on the road. But this is the type of work that we really like to do. So, yes.
I just want to apologize to you personally for keeping you waiting.
Oh. Not a problem
Sorry.
at all. I will do my best to stay on time. The one thing that the center, all of us collectively are not good at is we just like to talk. So we tend to go a little long. So I will do my very best to keep this short and to the point so you guys can stay on track. Before I get into what I was going to talk about though, I wanted to see, is there anything specific either from the board or the public or the staff that you want to make sure that we cover today? Yeah.
I have been wondering whether or not our board agenda should include some routine examination of conflict of interest.
Ooh, interesting.
Whether or not each time we meet as a board or take action, should we ensure that there is no conflict of interest?
Great. We'll definitely, we'll talk about standing agenda. That's perfect. Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Anything else? Nothing? We got one thing and we can go home? I mean, I think you guys have something. Okay,
I'll we need to know about noticing, we need to know about public comments and regular thereof, we need to know about what items the board really has to take public comment on before taking action. Those are all useful things for the.
And I would have one about, kind of, what kind of accommodations should the board and office be thinking about making for people with accessibility? And also, like, I know that in some governmental entities, they even have notes about that on the agenda.
Yep. Perfect. I like to tell lots of stories. Everything you say reminds me of a good story. We have a community right now that's dealing with accessibility in a very principal ADA sense. And they realize that their meeting space on the second floor of their building. and they had a member of the public ask to move it. So now it's created this crisis in the community about how to make sure people have access. This has been an issue since ADA came into play, but now that somebody said something, it's a big deal. So if we can get ahead of those things, that's great. All right, yeah.
So this is more just a interest question, not pertinent to this board necessarily, but I know other boards are moving towards going back to just in-person meetings
Yeah.
and not having Zoom
Yeah.
accessibility. So I just wondered what there as a requirement or not.
It's a great question. Definitely something we should talk about since you guys are doing the Zoom thing. Okay. What else? Good. All right, so I'm gonna start with. Oh, yeah.
I apologize. Is it possible to have you move a little closer to the speaker? We're trying to take notes and unfortunately you get far away, it gets echoey and we can't hear you.
You mean you want to be able to hear everything that I say?
We would like to.
Okay, I will do my best to stay here-ish. I have a hard time staying on place, but I will do my very best. If you can't hear me, please speak up, interrupt me. I want to make sure that it's clear for everybody that it's online as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. One thing I want to mention, so at the center, we do education only. We are not attorneys by trade, and so we always say, instead of educational information, please seek competent legal counsel, because they're the ones that have to do that. So, best practices, we'll talk about Montana code, open meeting, sunshine laws, but make sure you always defer to your attorney's advice. They're the ones that get you. Okay, we ready? Before we jump into the packet and itself, I just want to do a little bit of a thought experiment so we can ground ourselves in what is local government. So I said everything under state level is what we deal with. Why do we have local government? Why does it exist? What does local government do? If you think maybe at a county or city level, kind of that broader perspective, why do we have? To add more red tape.
To, I guess, address needs and issues that come up maybe on a smaller level and they're more locale communities.
Perfect, yeah. So if you think about, say, municipalities, very well defined, they do things like provide law enforcement services and water and sewer and parks and roads. Can you imagine if we were each responsible for maintaining and say paving our own stretch of road in front of us, 50 feet on either side? Figure out who the equipment, material, nobody's gonna tell you how to run it. Make sure that you have it paved. Can you imagine driving here in Missouri? How much of a hot mess that would be. So we have services that we are better off coming together and providing as a collective instead of individually, right? The services that are given to us or provided to us by this local government. How are those services funded?
Taxes.
Keyword, yeah. So we quote unquote voluntarily pool our resources, right? And that pays for those local services. And then who oversees the administration of that money that's
Elected or appointed officials,
oh, and where does elected and appointed officials come from?
the community.
Most of the time they don't come from a DC based organization, right? But we have some of the land slides. But usually these local government services are provided by people in your community, your neighbors, right? So it's a local service funded by local dollars and overseen by local people. That's what makes local government different and special. And the reason that it works is because we have volunteers who are willing to step up and serve the community by being on a board, right? Okay, so that's why we have local government. Does anybody know what happened in Montana in 1972?
Can you narrow that down a little bit?
Several range. Well, it wasn't the scratch that out.
They rewrote the Constitution.
We rewrote our constitution. So rewrote. It wasn't our first one. Nailed it.
Good job, Roger.
No, constitution. You have to have a state constitution be admitted into the union, right? So we tried getting into the union the first time with the constitution in the late 1870s. Said, hey, you want to be part of the club? Union came back and said, no, it's not good enough. Okay, so people in the state wrote another constitution and they borrowed heavily from Pennsylvania and Iowa, which are both big railroad states. So their constitution reflected. It didn't really fit with a lot of what Montana needed. And then on top of that, people who controlled a lot of what went into our constitution were a very specific group in a very specific area in Montana. Any guesses where that might be? In the late 1800s? Native American, right? So the Constitution heavily favored the companies and the industry and didn't really help out the other 99.9% of the state. So by the late 60s, early 70s, state came together, and that was one of the major reasons they said, we really got to rewrite this. It's kind of a mess. It's not working for the rest of us. So they sent 100 delegates to Helena to write a new constitution with the gigantic caveat that if you served as a delegate, you were not allowed to serve as elected official in the state. So you couldn't write it to serve your own use, right? So we had the Constitution passed and ratified in 1972. In our Constitution, our state Constitution, we have, like our federal Constitution, these rights. And the rights that we care about the most kind of commonly at the center are 8, 9, and 10. The right to know, the right to participate, and the right to privacy. That's the backbone basis of all things local government in Montana. That's where we get the open meeting laws. That's where we get all of the kind of guidance of how we do what we do. So we had the Constitution. Give us some broad guidance, right? And then how do you go from the Constitution to here to go to action can and can't do?
Lawmaking,
Who does that?
legislature, and governor.
Okay, so every year for 90 days, legislature convenes in Helena and creates laws, and they get codified into the Montana Code annotated. That's our law, right? This is what we can and can't do in the state. This is a statewide guidance system for us. And then inside of that, are there things that you can do in Prairie County that you can't do in the Sewell County? Maybe, maybe not. Does the county commission have the authority and discretion to create ordinances? As long as they don't interfere and go contradictory to the Montana Code, they do. And it applies to their physical area, in this case, the county, right? So you have countywide or maybe citywide ordinances that act as local ones. You have local ordinances. That's another set of rules that we have. And then, inside of that, does a local ordinance tell you how you should run your board? In this case, you don't, you're codified. What about the water system? Does that tell you every detail you need to know about how the water system works in a county, typical county? No, you have your own rules of procedure, right? So then you have these bylaws. RPs. This is what we call constitution to action in our office. Big picture up here, and then each step is a little bit more clear. What happens if there's a dispute? Who deals with that? So that third branch of government, right? We have a lot of times when it comes to the MTA, the AG or the Montana Supreme Court. Again, this is all in the context of Montana's state laws, right? I profess to know absolutely nothing about county law, so I can't speak to any of that. But for the state law, the Attorney General or the Montana Supreme Court could intervene basically anywhere along this continuum and say, this is what, say, the code actually means. Or here's the intention of the Constitution, and it is contrary to it or no. So what are the three branches of the government? You didn't know you were getting a civics lesson, did you? Judicial, okay, so we know those guys.
Executive.
Executive, okay. And
Legislative.
legislative. So the people that make laws, people that execute the laws, and the people that judge whether that's and whether the laws constitute. That's true for federal, right? So we have the Congress, we have the president, we have the judicial system. In the state, we have the legislature, we have the governor, then we have legislature. What about for you guys? Do you follow this?
We might need more circles.
We got all this. So, you as a board, when you are together as a body, you are the legislative branch. Okay? Ethan and company serve as the executive branch. They operationalize the policy that you all decide. And then the judicial branch for you guys is a little bit interesting because you kind of serve as your own judicial branch. Okay, it's a whole new spin on it that you still kind of like, this is complicated. But you still follow that same three-circle balance of power that we see in the rest of the country. And it's a balance for that check and making sure that nobody has undue authority. And that's what we like to see, and that keeps everybody kind of in the right arena. Are we good with this? The consensus constitution action? Okay. All right, now we can look at the packs. Did everybody get one of these or have access to it online? We have links that were sent out. Good. Got it? Okay. These are the packets by which we do all of our training for work. And we are super creative in the center. You can see inside there is a left side packet and a right side. How we do this. Let's start with the left side packet. Page L1. At the very top, you'll see highlighted those constitutional rights I was talking about. The right to participate, the right to know, and the right to privacy. Everything that we do and everything we train on basically comes back to one of those three rights, one or more. In Montana, the public has the right to expect government agencies to afford such reasonable opportunity for citizen participation in the operation of the agencies prior to final decision as may be provided by law. So that's basically pointing you down and say, yeah, you have this right, go look at the code to see how it's operationalized. No person shall be deprived of the right to examine documents or observe deliberation in all public bodies or agencies in the state, all the subdivisions, except if you have a different right to privacy. So that's that third right to look at. So that's big picture for us. Constitution. Let's jump down to 23103. In my opinion, the bottom of page L1. This statute is the one that is the most important to understand as you work in public service. If you understand the intent of this statute, everything else is just how to. Okay. Let's go through it. Each agency shall develop procedures for permitting and encouraging the public to participate in agency decisions that are of significant interest to the public. Permitting and encouraging. So that means you have to have these rules of procedure, which you guys are working on, that not only allows the public in, but encourages them to participate. And that's why when you look at your agenda and you see public comment on every single agenda item, that's their instrument for that, right? It's not just to make it really annoying to go through the whole agenda. And where a chairman typically is up there, sees with the city council all the time, and the mayor will be up, and there's nobody in the audience, so you're talking to yourself. Any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? Hearing no public comment, we'll move to action. They do that every time. And it's sad, it feels silly to do it, but you're doing it not just to check the box, but to protect their rights. You have to protect people's rights. You don't have to compel them to honor them. But it's your job as a board. Okay. Now, as you would imagine, there are things in the code that are not super clear. Like, what is significant public interest? In the case of a board, anytime you're making a decision and taking an action, it's probably public interest. And they have a right not only to participate prior to final action, but to observe the deliberations. And that's where it gets really tricky, because we have to balance expediency and efficiency with access. And if there's ever a question, we have to follow inside access. So we know that it says the procedures must ensure adequate notice and assist the public in participation before final action is taken of significant public interest. What is adequate notice? What would you consider adequate notice? As a member of the public.
30 days.
30 days, okay. So, if I put my agenda out, let's say I'm a clerk in a city, I put the agenda out on behalf of the mayor, for council, post it. And I post it 30 days out. If that's our threshold, I can't make any changes to that agenda. Not true, I can't make any additions to that agenda once it's posted, if that's our threshold. That's a long time now, right? There's a lot that can happen in 30 days. This was one of those things that was litigated, that they needed clarification on. So we had the third branch government come in and say, what is adequate notice? The Attorney General came back with an opinion and said, we think that 48 hours is the minimum posting time to provide reasonable adequate notice. And that amount should increase with the relative importance of the subject being discussed. So, if the city of Kalispell decided they wanted to disincorporate, probably going to need more than 48 hours, right? But for most things that you do, 48 hours. Once it's posted, once it's out there, if you make any additions to that agenda, that timeline starts over. Because if I were a member of the public, let's say you posted at the courthouse, your agenda, and I go in and look at it, you post Friday afternoons for a Monday afternoon, or Monday evening meeting. And I go in on Friday and it's posted by 2 o'clock, and I go in at 2:30 and I see the agenda, nothing under that I'm really concerned about, good, and I leave. And then at 4:30, something gets added to the agenda that I'm really passionate about. I have no idea it's there. And that violates my constitutional right to reasonably expect that I should know about it. So 48 hours, once it's out there, things stay. You can take things off, you can move to the next meeting, but if you're adding things after it's posted, be very careful about your final action. Okay. That's also why Stephen was adding a public comment on your agenda. It's on there twice, right? Or lots of times. But you have public comment as item number 2, and you have public comment as item number 9. Why are there 2 public comments? We look at that next line. The agenda for the meeting, as defined in 23203, must include an item allowing public comment on any public matter that is not on the agenda of the meeting and is within the jurisdiction of the agency conducting the meeting. So anything that's not on your agenda but you have authority over, that needs to have a place for public comment. The kicker to it, though, is let's say somebody brings something up for consideration by the board, but it's not on the agenda. You cannot engage in any kind of substantive deliberation about that topic, right? Because I bring up some issue that I wanted to talk about. If you start discussing it, now anybody else that would have wanted to be part of that discussion didn't know what was going to happen, because we didn't know what was going to happen, and they didn't have the opportunity to be there and be engaged in. So the most you can really do is say, thanks so much for bringing it up. Let's put that on the agenda for next meeting. So that's why you have one at the end. It's very hard at the end because then it kind of helps separate. We're done with the stuff that was already on the agenda that's posted. Let's take a moment for anything else, or we're not going to engage in it in a really deliberate way. The public comment at the beginning of the meeting, that's more for anything on the agenda. And I'm a big fan of the way that you guys have it here, with public comment at the beginning and then public comment at each individual item. You can't overdo public comment, right? But you can underdo it, and that costs a lot of money. There is a city in the state, I don't like to name names, but it's Great Falls, and they tested this and they lost big time. They had an agenda for their city council meeting, and they had a consent agenda at the top, which is, for those of you who may not get all nerded out on things like agendas, parliamentary procedure. Consent agenda is a place on the agenda where you have a whole bunch of action items that are not typically controversial. So it's things like the treasurer's report, the minutes, and the engineer report, all these things that we need to have included. But that's a lot of motion to go through. So you can lump them, you can put them all together and say, do all these things. Is there any objection to any of the items on the consent agenda? Anyone in the legislative body say, I want to pull item number 3, and you can pull it out and deal with it independently. Everything else can pass or fail by a single vote. So it's a way to save a lot of time. And City of Great Falls did that. And they had on their consent agenda the minutes, treasurer's report, couple other department reports. Then they have this one action item that was, they had a contract with a dog catcher, basically, for at-large animals in the city. Catcher taking the town or local names. And they were moving from one contract to the other, but there was a 6-week gap. So I don't know if it was that they were going to extend the previous contract, we were going to move up the start date of the new contract, or wait plan. There was a gal who was really upset with this potential decision. So they did the consent agenda and they had public comment. She got up to the podium and said, hey, I really don't like this, started getting very agitated. She had her 3 minutes, which we can talk about public comment limits later if we want to. Had her 3 minutes. Chair said, thank you for your comment. Ma'am, time is up. Ma'am, please sit down. She kept getting more and more agitated. Finally, they had to have the on-duty police officer come up and escort her out of the room. So he comes up and kind of gathers up her stuff, takes her kind of by the elbow and says, ma'am, please come with me. She's fighting him, fighting him, fighting him. They get to the door and she knees him in the groin and takes out. They finally catch up with him. They charge her with committing arrests, assaulting a police officer, and public misconduct. So then she goes to get her attorney, attorney says, hey, you know what happened? Well, they made this decision, I got up there, I got really mad. So wait. They made a decision, and then you got the problem? Said, yeah. Great. So this went through lower court, the appeals process, ended up with the Montana Supreme Court. And they said, and this woman was not a member, not a citizen of the City of Great Falls, but that side of the leagues. It doesn't matter because our constitutional rights are for the public, not for the citizens of a jurisdiction. Right? Supreme Court says, you're right, your constitutional right is violated, and everything that happened after that violation is the responsibility of the city. So not only did they lose on all 3 charges, the city got to pay this woman $500,000 and then another $400,000 in attorney's fees. So you're almost $1 million you were paying because of where public comment was made. That's why it's so important. Beyond the whole protecting everybody's rights. It also can get really, really expensive. And nobody wants to tell their members or their citizens, hey, we got to charge more. You're not getting any more services because we messed up. Okay. That's my big scary story for the day. But that's where we get into this agenda and notice and public comment. So the way that you all have on here with public comment after or before each action item, I think is great. That gives people a chance if they want to come in and say something to the board in general about a topic at the beginning of the meeting, they can do that. But if they are really passionate about topic number 6.3, they could have a specific targeted comment time for that item. Then it stays with the item in the record. Okay. All right. So, talk about the agency may not take action on any matter discussed unless it's specifically noticed. And then public comment must be included in the official meeting minutes. All right, so that is a massive amount of information in one statute. But does anybody have any questions? We'll look online to give you guys a set. Okay. All right, we got through the big one. Let's flip to page L3. And we'll take a look at how this is kind of operationalized. So if we look at part 2, open meetings. So legislative intent for open meetings is that public boards, commissions, councils, other public agencies in the state exist to aid the conduct of the people's business. I had a city official tell me once, ask me, how much do we need to put in the agenda in the council packet? How much bare minimum needs to be in there? And his follow-up comment was, we have some nosy members of the public and I need them to stay out of our business. This is not your business, it's their business. You just happen to be here to make it all happen, right? This is the public's business. And the board, the executive office, they're the ones that administer it. It's not yours to hold on to, right? It's the public's and you're here to facilitate. So that's what that section is saying. Meeting defined 23202. So a meeting is defined as a convening of the quorum. And this group is a little bit unique in that quorum is not a simple majority of this quorum, you know. But a meeting of the quorum, whether by corporal or electronic means, to hear, discuss, or act on any matter over which the agency has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. There are 6 things that make a meeting in Montana. What do you think they are? What are the elements of a meeting? We know one of them.
Agenda.
The agenda, okay? What do you do with the agenda?
You publish it, you follow it.
So you notice your agenda, at least 48 hours anyway. And then can you have a meeting at any time with anybody? It's a tricky question. We have to have a certain group together, right? So we have to have quorum. What did we just spend the last 15 minutes talking about? Who has
Public comment.
public comment? Okay, so you have to have public comment. Okay. What's the record of the meeting?
Minutes.
Minutes, you have to have minutes. And then this last piece in 202. Convening of the quorum to hear, discuss, or act. This is a really important 2-letter word. Why? Let's say the 4 of you are together doing something social. Let's say there's a basketball game. You all go to the basketball game. And you're sitting kind of close to each other. Is that a meeting? Not necessarily. But if I come up and say, hey, board members, have you had time to consider that thing that we talked about last meeting? Now is it a meeting? Could be. Could be, because now you are hearing something that you have jurisdiction over as a body, and there's a quorum present. Does that make sense? So a meeting is not just when actions are being taken. It's any time that the quorum is present and this one of these 2 things happen. That gets a little bit nebulous. If you all ride together in a vehicle to a conference, could that potentially be a meeting? Are you going to discuss? There's a public trust that you're not going to discuss it. You have jurisdiction. Trainings like this, it's not during a meeting. Is that a meeting? Could be. So you have to be really careful about what's happening here. So let's see. This and this make it a meeting, and the other 4 make it legal. Okay. What about if I email the board a question and you start having an email conversation? Or text conversation. It says by corporal or electronic means, which includes things like Zoom, but also email and phone. All of those things count. Anytime that you're having any kind of discussion around things that you have some kind of meeting. And if you do it online, you automatically violate that meeting sunshine law kind of removes statutes. Okay. This also leads us into ex parte communication. Well, let's talk about the accessibility thing first before we talk about ex parte. So when you said accessibility, is it different than the virtual accessibility? Are you talking physical or are you talking about accessibility?
I'm talking about all of it.
Oh, okay, perfect. So you're in a good spot here because you have access to the meeting space from outside your company upstairs, right? For the most part. You can put a ramp out front and you get people in here. So as far as physical accessibility, I think you're pretty good. The virtual accessibility is where it gets a little bit tricky, and we have a document somewhere. Let me do with it. When the pandemic hit and we had to go completely virtual, the Attorney General's office and Montana agencies and towns came together. We spent a lot of time trying to formulate what it would look like to have meetings that didn't violate those constitutional rights, but still maintain the social distancing safety measures that we were trying to implement. So they endorsed this guidance, which is basically what we're all doing now. At the end, their guidance was cancel non-essential meetings, limit public meetings to critical only, determine the type of meeting. So you still had to notice your meeting. If a meeting was to be held in whole or in part through remote attendance, the local government should strive, if possible, to provide a remote communication system that provides the members of the local governing body and the public the ability to see, hear, and reasonably participate in the meeting. If the local government does not have the technology or resources to provide the video conferencing, either temporarily or permanently, the local government must ensure, at a minimum, each member of the governing body and public in attendance must be able to adequately hear each other. Members of the public must be provided reasonable opportunity to comment, both items on the agenda and not on the agenda, either through remote communication systems or other reasonable means. And all members of the governing body and public must be able to reasonably observe all materials reviewed, because that right to know includes materials and deliberations. So they have access to the local government's website, video conferencing, individual email, in person, whatever it may be. The local government must provide a method to take minutes or record of the meeting pursuant to the governing body's established rules for taking minutes. So that's what we came up with and what the Attorney General endorsed when COVID happened, and it kind of is leading us through now to what it should look like for all the meetings. And this is great. It gives you a chance to both see and hear deliberations. Bare minimum, you need to be able to hear and respond in real time. One thing that I would suggest, we talked about this earlier, if you're doing Zoom meetings, when you notice your meeting, you have a Zoom link, I would also encourage you to put the calling number on. Two things happen when you're putting the calling number on. If Zoom goes down and you just have a tech nightmare, you can always use the call as a backup, and you can do basically a conference call. Second, you can't assume that everybody has access to a computer and the internet. So it's a way for people to participate that don't have access to those things. And that's where we get into that accessibility and fairness. Even if I don't have that, it's pretty reasonable to expect that I have access to some kind of phone line, and I can call it out. Okay. Yeah.
So what happens in a meeting if, let's say, you know, the internet cuts out, right, or you don't have sound for a period of time, and then it comes back?
Mm-hmm.
So then do you go through that part of the meeting again? Or?
I would, because then if I was first online, it was the one item that I wanted to hear, but I didn't get to hear it. There was an expectation that I would be able to do so remotely, so I didn't drive into town to do that. And now I don't have access to it. So always err on the side of access and repeat if necessary. It sometimes feels like you're just taking forever and everything is running. But the point of government is not to be efficient at the expense of other people's rights, at everybody's rights. We want to be as expedient as we can be, but within the bounds of the law. Yeah.
So that happened at one of our Board of Adjustment meetings. The Zoom went down and we continued on and made a decision. And so then the next meeting, we had to come back and rehear that item because it wasn't, we'd lost the content.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Which is infuriating.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But that brings us to, well, So we'll talk about ex parte, so that. Let's talk about the notice real quick first. So let's say you notice your meetings, you put it on your website, that's great. This should be written into your rules of procedure, your bylaws when you get there, so that you have, we meet these regular times at this place, on these dates, whether it's every other week, the first or third week, or whatever it may be. And then also include where you post your meeting notes. And again, don't assume that everybody has access to the internet. So the county law says it needs to be in newspaper or regular circulation. If you don't have that, which I would argue, since you cover such a big space, there's not a single newspaper or regular circulation. 3 places that it's posted, physically posted. And a lot of times it's the courthouse, the library, and the post office. Or if you're in a small community and you have a 1 cafe and it's posted on there. Just make sure it's the same place and it's posted at the same time before each meeting, so that people have a reasonable expectation of knowing when they can go find that information. All right, now we can talk about ex parte. What is ex parte communication? I know we have a lot of people in this room. Any ideas? What's that? Yes, that can be part of it, yeah. So, it's discussion, yes, that's happening outside of the public to view, basically. In our office, we think about ex parte kind of little e and big E. Little e ex parte, when you're in legislative mode. Let's say 3 of you get together and have a conversation about something that's coming up that you need to decide on as policy based. Are you breaking open meeting laws? The 3 of you are discussing? No. What if the 3 of you are discussing it and then 2 of you go talk to one of the other members? There's still only 3. Now are you breaking open meeting laws? That feels like it, right? So what you've done now is a forum of the body has engaged in deliberative substantial discussion, even if it wasn't at the same time, outside of the view of the public. That's what we call a chain meeting. That's what we consider small e ex parte. Big E, for this board, kind of like the board of adjustments, you serve a quasi-judicial role. Meaning you may or may not have formal legal training, but you are deciding, finding of fact type decisions, right? In that case, you're operating kind of like a judge. And you have to hold these hearings, hear evidence, you have the power to subpoena people, all that you can see. In that case, you have the legislative role, and then you have this quasi-judicial role. In that role, the ex parte, the bar for public comment, public participation is much higher. It's basically anything that any interested party has anything to do with the topic that's being discussed or decided needs to happen in front of the public. It's like if you were in a court meeting and the plaintiff attorney left, say they went on break, and the defense attorney ran to the judge and said, hey, I really need to know this information so we can talk about this, but I want you to know ahead of time, so you can kind of think about it. And then they run back, and the plaintiff attorney comes back from the room. They didn't have full access, right? In theory, that's kind of what would happen if you were to engage in discussion with a member, an interested party, in some kind of hearing topic that the rest of the public didn't have access to. That's what we call big E ex parte. Again, I don't know an attorney, so please consult your legal counsel if you have any questions. I just want to bring that kind of to your awareness. All right. You feel good about that? Okay. Tell me about this conflict of interest thing. What is happening there? What are you thinking for standing up? And what types of things would you want to review? What do you think?
The types of things we would want to reveal is that if we had a particular personal interest in an action item on the agenda,
Okay.
if our interest went beyond just the role that we serve.
Yep, okay. I don't know. Maybe you can tell us with the tribal law, is there a specific conflict of interest section of the tribal code?
That's a good question. I don't know that there's a conflict of interest section. There are ordinances that have conflict of interest, like our personnel ordinance.
Okay, yep.
Has conflict of interest section.
I think that's the second thing.
And there's one with that too. There's a conflict of interest.
Okay, okay.
There is a conflict of interest tribal resolution that extends to any tribal employee.
Okay, okay.
Whether you're serving on a board, serving as an employee, or, you know, conducting official tribal business.
Okay.
It's quite a dated resolution. I think it's in 1994, 1996. But it goes to conflict of interest and it goes to ethics.
Yep, okay. So in the same packet, the left side on page L9 starts, let's start with the Montana code of ethics. So that's why I'm asking if you could correct the one side, I just don't know. But for our state law, there's things in here about you can't accept a gift of substantial value that may improperly influence your discharge of public duty. What the public trust is, 22103 is a really important statute that defines that for us. What I'm looking for. So 22105, ethical requirements on page L11. Ethical requirements for public officers and public employees. The requirements of this section are intended as rules of conduct and violation constitute a breach of the public trust. Means that you can be held personally liable. Subsection 2. Public officer or public employee may not acquire an interest in a business or undertaking that the officer or employee has reason to believe may directly and substantially affected to its economic benefit by official action to be taken by the officer or employee's agency. So you can't have a financial interest in anything that could be affected by your decision on the board, right? That's when you should be looking at abstaining. Other than that, you can do both, right? But that is subsection 2 and subsection 5, both of those highlighted, are kind of where we see in the state code. Conflict of interest tends to be fairly narrowly defined as that financial interest. Now, that's big E ethics, little E ethics, public opinion. It looks like you probably have something to do with this. Maybe you should explain it. Just because you might have some connection to something doesn't automatically necessarily mean that you have to remove yourself from that discussion. You need to disclose it, and then that's where I would have legal counsel say, yeah, you're over the threshold, or no, you're good. You disclosed it, but we believe you reasonably could still make a decision. So I think it's not a bad thing to just think about that routinely, and you think you see something come up on your agenda that you might have some kind of conflict. Talk to your attorney ahead of time, or the board's attorney ahead of time. Let them know. They really appreciate when they don't have to figure out what to do with it after it's already happened. But there are ways to do that. And in this board's case, you have a high threshold for your forum. So if more than one person has conflict of interest, we have a problem. Hopefully that doesn't prove an issue at some point. All right.
Oh, I have a question about that then. Once you have a quorum, if you have folks abstaining, is in the majority vote, so can you, if you have a conflict, can you still count as making the quorum occur?
Depends on how your legal counsel will interpret what the public said. So,
I think we've already had that happen once, and
what's that?
we've had 4 members at a meeting. And we went ahead and made a decision when one person abstained. Because we still had a majority.
So what was the threshold for quorum? Was it 3 or 4 members? 4. Okay. So.
For voting members, I think it is.
Yeah.
Or, which is important.
Yeah.
Yes.
For this group, yeah, that's definitely an important distinction to make. The way that it's written in the code, it's a little bit gray. Does it include discussion? A lot of times what we'll see is the local government attorney will advise the person who has a conflict of interest to leave the room while the discussion is happening, so they're not involved in that. Other attorneys say, no, you don't need to do that, you just need to not vote. Just check with them before you have a vote to make sure that you can still, it still counts as quorum, because some of them will say no, it doesn't. If you're the four-member board and somebody's gone, and you have to stay, you're still in the room, some of them will say you were not an active participant in the meeting at that time, so you don't. That makes it really, really hard, yeah.
Just a point of clarification, you can abstain without, even if you don't have a conflict, and then you still have quorum, correct?
Legally, yes, I wouldn't. Okay. Because you have a duty to vote. In that the public has entrusted you with this position to represent them. If you're not voting, you're not representing them. Can you go by proxy? If, let's say, if you're not gonna be here, you say, yeah, go ahead, you wanna put that thing, go ahead and put me down for it, and I gave up. Please don't do that. Here's why. If you came in, let's say I'm on board, and I say, hey, I'm not gonna be there, I am leaving the state, my family for vacation, so I know we wanna get this passed, go ahead and just put me down for a vote, we'll call it good. Did the public have a chance to influence my decision at all? No. So I'm violating their right to participate by not taking into consideration their public comment before I make a decision. So I would like to see, is anybody here on the?
About all of that, in that, doesn't it in part depend on what rules and procedures the board adopt themselves, whether or not they want to follow Robert's rules of order or Morton's rules of order, or whether or not they want to allow proxy or not proxy. I mean, legislation is proxy all the time. So, you know, I know it can be done.
So they don't necessarily follow themselves. If you, so, yes, you need to define your own rules, procedure, or bylaws, they will govern how you operate at that granular level as a board. But they can't violate a higher set of rules, right? So you can't have a state statute that violates our constitution. You can't have a local ordinance that violates state statute, so you as a board cannot say, in our rules of procedure, adequate notice is 12 hours. No, it's 48 hours. If you want to add more to it, say actually ours is 72, you can do that. Because you're still meeting that minimum threshold set by the state, but you can't give yourself permission to break the rules. That makes sense? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, no, I think you can do that. I think there is room for the board to adopt through its policies and procedures what it wants to accept as far as rules of how you want to govern your meeting. I mean, you have to meet what she's talking about, but we can also have discussion about whether or not we want to follow Robert's rules, whether or not we want to follow Morton's. The legislation, both of which allow for different things like abstaining and maintaining. What you need to do for conflicts that might be a little bit different than what we're talking. So there, I just want you to know there's variability.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where legal counsel comes in, because you guys are. So.
I'd just like some clarification. So if you have someone absent or traveling, you have someone abstains, right? And we're down that number of members. Then if we don't have a quorum, do we carry that action forward to another meeting? Is that the safest way to go?
If your legal counsel decides that that abstaining person no longer counts as quorum, so now we're out of quorum, I would say yes, the decision to postpone an action is not a decision on that action, right? So that board member that should abstain could vote on the motion to postpone.
Okay,
Because that's a procedural motion,
okay.
not a motion on that action.
But then you would, if by delaying it, you would have enough people hopefully
Yeah, so then you really hope that person's back on vacation, so you have that one person be able to abstain and still meet quorum the next time.
So our BIA representative, according to the ordinance, will always be a non-voting member, even if we're in that situation, correct? You're off the hook, correct?
Right, something.
Yeah.
Statute's pretty clear. It says no action will take in the absence of the quorum.
Yeah, and you all have a unique situation where it's codified in its own special part of the law, right? So you're not necessarily just following Title II, but you have this compact that says our quorum's a higher bar, and you can't do anything unless you have a quorum.
But I think there's a difference though, between whether or not you have. Just to be clear about abstaining, right? Like, you are just abstaining from the vote because you don't want to take a position on it. And you participated in the deliberation on that. You haven't identified that you have a conflict. And I get what you're saying, that you have to ask whether or not in abstaining, you still may take, generally, at least under Robert's Rules of Order, if you are abstaining for a non-conflict purpose and you participated, it still counts as a quorum. But if you are abstaining for purposes of a conflict issue, then like she said, you consulted with your legal counsel, and your legal counsel said you need to leave and not be part of the discussion, then you absolutely don't have it. Is my armchair analysis.
So maybe I'm overthinking this,
Probably.
but the reservation is essentially a very small town, right? We all know each other, a lot of us are related to one another. I can foresee lots of opportunities where somebody comes before us that we know, we're friends with, we're related to. And we're gonna feel like we need to abstain or not be involved. And maybe I'm not looking at this the right way, but it seems like we could get into trouble on quorum issues pretty quickly.
So that's where, under the state statute with ethics, it's defined in financial terms.
Okay,
And that's where I don't know the tribal. But in that case, let's say it's, and this gets into nepotism a little bit too. I think it's defined in here, it can't be you or an immediate family member that has a financial interest in, let's say we're bidding on something. My sister can't be a co-owner in the construction company that's bidding on this project. Does that make sense?
do the tribes define immediate family the same way?
I'll have to look at that and burn that in, but I think what the board can do is adopt its own conflict of interest policy.
Okay.
Within your policies and procedures that can combine both the state requirements and the tribal requirements as far as establishing a conflict, when you can disclose the conflict,
Okay.
when you have to disclose the conflict, and then what happens after that. I mean, because you only have 5 members, it could get kind of dicey about conflict. So
Yeah.
that's something else to keep in mind. But that's something you'll need to work through with the legal counsel as you draft forward bylaws and procedures.
Yeah, just add, so, and just a reminder, it's been a little while since we've looked at the personnel policy, but the last draft that at least I looked at, we did have a section on nepotism and conflict of interest and financial conflict of interest that drew on both the tribal employee policy and the state employee policy, and generally met both of those, but it didn't include information about board voting. But it was just more defining those terms and defining family members.
And I can't remember where we left that, but I know I have several students, for instance, who define immediate family in a much broader way. And we wanted to be sensitive to that in the personnel policy if there was a death, right? That's the instance I was thinking of. But I just think we need to be sensitive to that and be aware that that could be defined in a different way here. And that can definitely affect whether or not we can participate in the vote, right? So that will need Boy, this is getting complicated very quickly, so. Right? Yeah.
I think I appreciate bringing that up because we're dealing with two independent problems that have equal weight, right? And so we have to make sure that we're following both of them to the broadest degree necessary to convince everybody. Okay, yeah.
In a real pinch, can the board delegate to the executive?
Give me more, give me more.
Let's say that there's an important policy decision, but there's two board members who have a direct conflict of interest. It's a fun hypothetical, but, so, and then we somehow landed on this scenario where a quorum could be met. Can the board collectively, make a procedural determination to delegate, that decision to their executive arm?
I would argue no, and here's why. The legislative body is the body that decides rules, policies. The executive branch is the one that executes those policies. So if you're making a decision about a policy, yes or no, that falls directly under the legislative duty. Now, in your case, if it were a hearing question, that might be a little bit different because both the executive and the legislative branch have some degree of judicial responsibility. So if you're in legislative mode with policy, they say no. If you're in hearing mode, potentially yes. And then if they wanted to fight it, it would still go back to the board as the first stop. It would be in the whole mess. Yeah.
I think in hearing mode would be, in my limited understanding, would be more of a no, because the executive is the office of the engineer. So then they'd be appealing to the board.
Right.
From an office of the engineer decision, so then.
Exactly. So we could start there, right? But then if they say, no, we don't like that decision, we're gonna go appeal, now we're back to the.
Right.
Yeah.
So then it would make sense for.
And the only time that would work is if the office of the engineer made a decision and the applicant didn't want to appeal.
Would you ever have the situation where due to conflict and inability to reach a decision, whether the non-voting member of the board would be like a tiebreaker or they would weigh in? Under the scenario that Ethan described, I would argue that that's a hard no, because I can't delegate my appointed authority. But we have a member of the board who has been appointed by an appropriate jurisdiction. Would they ever have a vote in the case of a deadlock or an inability to make a decision?
Really good question for your attorney. I would say no as educational, because you can't do that without violating the rules. Right.
Well, it says in the ordinance and the compact that it's a non-voting member.
Who's that?
The sixth member of our.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant the person who was,
No.
oh, yeah, no, the ex-official member, no, they cannot. And so let's say you're deadlocked 2-2, then it fails, right? If you either have to actively pass by majority or it fails.
Okay, or just
And that's in your wording here. Let's see. The proposal is put to a vote of the quorum of the board members and it ends in a tie vote. The proposal is deemed disapproved or denied.
So I'm curious, Montana has a lot of small communities, just like this one. Do other municipalities take this approach? Do other agencies and governments, or do they have larger boards?
Large boards are scary.
Okay, so
County commissions, almost always are 3 people.
3 people.
3 people.
Okay, so we're larger than normal.
Now, the one thing that's kind of tying you up here is that your quorum is 4, not 3. Right, so majority of your person vote, you can't do a 3-person vote, they all agree. Like you put in municipality or county.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, county commissioners, I'm saying this recorded and I recognize it, I'm sorry, commissioners, they have the worst at quorum, because two of them at any given time is a quorum, right? And, bring one second up here, that three circle diagram, who's the legislative branch of the commission? Or the county? Commission, right? Who's the executive branch? Also the commission. When they're in policy legislative role, they're the legislative branch. When they're in the execution role of that policy, they're in their executive branch. So they can, three of them be sitting there all day and not be in an official meeting because they're executing policy. But as soon as they have a discussion about something that is creating policy, now it's a meeting. So, but we like to have this, we like the separation, much easier to do.
So, not to belabor this too much, but we were in a discussion yesterday about items we want to include on the website to help minimize some of the misinformation out there or help the public better understand what we do.
Yep.
And it seems if we have a 4-person quorum and a 5-member board, that we've held ourselves to even a higher level of scrutiny and accountability. And maybe that's one more thing we need to be communicating to the public, that we didn't water this down, we made it even more rigorous. And I don't think I fully understood that till you shared that. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, this particular group, this is complicated, and it's a high standard to meet. And so let's say you guys have a work session. Our work session is supposed to be in a. Yep. You could have a 3-person work session and not have to meet those departments, not a quorum, right? What happens in public comment? You're doing 3-person work sessions with the office of the engineer and somebody finds them. You're not breaking any law, but they're probably not going to trust you because it looks like you're doing shady, and it looks like it's murder, even if you're not intentional.
Well, we can have properly noticed meetings where we abide by every single thing we're supposed to, and we still have people that don't trust us.
Absolutely.
So, you
It's
know.
nature of local government. Here you are. Yep.
There are also a couple of things that require a unanimous decision on the board.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind when you're doing the policies and procedures, you know.
Such as the forms that I often bring to you, they require a unanimous vote.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So let's jump back to page L3. We get the rest is two dash. We know what a meeting economy is now. 23203. This is, I think, important to follow up. All meetings of public or government bodies, all of them, must be open to the public. That includes organizations who are supported in whole or in part by public funds, spending public funds. Then down here, number 6, any committee or subcommittee appointed by the public body. So let's say you all create a subcommittee to look at some specific thing. To put 3 members of the board and 2 members of the public committee. What's your quorum requirement? Absent something in your policy saying it's going to be like the board and it's 4. If you're following state law, it's 3. And it's not 3 members of the board, it's 3 members of the committee. They now are a new body and have to follow open meeting laws just like the board does. So if 2 members of the board and 1 member of the public are together on that new committee, it's 4. We see this a lot with city council. They, with good intentions, create subcommittees to look at different subjects, and they'll intentionally put 2 members of their 5-person council on the committee to say, well, we don't have a form of the council, so we don't have to notice. No, that new committee is a new body, and it has to follow those same laws as an advisory board. Yeah. Everything that happens has to happen in the open public when it comes to that legislative decision making. Yeah.
What about non-legislative decision?
Oh, like what?
Like something more like functional, like let's say deciding what is on like each page of the website, or something like that. Like, is that, I wouldn't consider that legislative.
So the website is something that the board has jurisdiction over. So discussion about that should happen with them if there's a quorum. If there's not a quorum, you don't have to have open meeting. But that goes back to, does the public trust you to have those discussions without their scrutiny?
I guess what my question is if there's a subcommittee about a non-legislative item, does that still follow the same?
Because any committee or subcommittee appointed by the public, doesn't matter what the committee is for. If they're created by the public body, they are now a new public. I know that's not the answer.
So it doesn't matter what subject they're it doesn't matter if they're working on something that's significant.
Because how we define significant public interest, we don't get to decide what it is, public gets to decide. And unless we go around and ask them in the first one, do, we assume the way that the attorney general defined it is anything above a ministerial acts. So beyond setting a time and date of a meeting and that kind of stuff, anything that's a discussion and actually being contemplated by the body is gonna be in that realm of significant public interest, if it were ever challenged. It gets really hard to do things.
And so, and ministerial is anything that, where a ministerial is something where you don't have, you don't actually get to decide whether you will do something.
Yeah, it's interesting administrative.
But if they're just working on something. And if they're not making a decision on it, they're just, and they're eventually gonna bring it back then to the board for a decision, does that still constitute a public meeting?
Yep, because what they're doing is discussing something under their advisory power.
Okay.
Because in 202, you see that last advisory bit. It's a separate term.
What was that site?
What's that?
What was the site? 203 what?
23202. At the end there, you get or advisory power.
And because I've had some separate conversations, but I wanted to bring this up. It is possible for multiple board members to separately interact with me or other members of their executive. I can receive direction from them about work products that they will eventually have a public meeting about.
Yes, you can receive input from individual members because it's not a directive from the board. So you are the hub, right? Now, I would be careful. If I think about this a lot like nonprofit. You have a board that sets policy, vision, direction. Then you have the executive office that's executing that. Keep those lines of communication very structured. In that, I would have the board only interact with Ethan, not with each individual staff member, unless you have kind of clear direction to do that. Because then it gets really dicey. I worked for a big in Montana nonprofit. And I was the person who was liaison between the executive team and the board. And so I got to deal with all of the politics that goes with that. And I had board members that would come to me and try to get things on the agenda because they didn't want to go talk to the executive team because they knew it wasn't going to get through. And so I turned into this middle person and it's off. So you all are starting off fresh and new, and it seems like you have a very good relationship anyway. But just make that clear. If we're looking at putting your rules of procedure, the board will communicate individually with the engineer, who will then instruct the staff on how to do what they need to do.
Question, back to what you just said though, and you said a board member may instruct the engineer.
Board member may give input. To the engineer.
Right. And so thinking about that, or even this idea of an individual giving direction, an individual may give input or make a suggestion, but unless the board acts on it, it's not direction.
It's not direct, exactly.
Okay.
Yes. So in this case, let's say we're trying to create a personnel policy. And he's trying to get your thoughts, because you each have expertise in different areas, that's why you're on the board, right? So asking questions and you individually getting responses, and then the staff, the executive branch, those professionals are putting together this draft that will then come to the entire board for consideration. But the individual board members have no power to give any kind of directive, because it has to be an action plan. Right? Okay. The only time that you can close a meeting, there's two reasons to close a meeting in Montana, in 23203, subsection 3. Presiding officer may close a meeting during the time that the discussion relates to the matter of individual privacy, and then if and only if the presiding officer determines that the demands for individual privacy clearly exceed the merits of public disclosure, because you have two competing constitutional rights, and by upholding one of them, you are necessarily violating it. I would say don't ever do this without your legal counsel knowing about it and feeling comfortable with it, because violating that right when you're not supposed to, just like we saw in Great Falls, can be incredibly detrimental to the body and the organization in the whole. There is a definition, I think it was an AG opinion, might have been a Supreme Court case, about what is included in individual privacy, what information would fall into that. There's things like medical records, arrest records, medication or health information. Evaluation. So in this case, if the board hires the engineer, is that how this works?
It is how it works.
Okay.
Yes,
So they evaluate you. Is that right?
we did.
Okay. So that discussion could happen in private. But if they, and this is a little bit tricky because local government, cities and counties are different than school boards. We see all the time that school boards will go into executive session to evaluate, say, superintendent. Let's say that's the case. It's the superintendent's right, not the school board's right. So if the superintendent says, I want to waive my right to privacy, this will be in an open meeting, the board doesn't need to decide otherwise. You'll see when we have some big kerfuffle happen and some superintendent or coach or whoever but something's going on in the community and they've got the entire community supporting them and the school board wants to get rid of them, that person, it's just happened in Deer Lodge. That person has the right to waive their right to privacy, and what they'll do is pack the gym with their supporters, and the school board has to face them and the entire community and explain why they want to get rid of them. You can't do that in the government in the same way because, well, in cities and counties, because the city typically only supervises, say, a city manager. The city manager supervises everybody else. So it's just that one direct line. So that's where I question, can we close a meeting to discuss your position only, or could it be the other position as well? And that would be something worth asking your legal counsel about. Yeah.
So I'll just throw a wrinkle at this,
Oh,
right? Again, I may be overthinking this. We talked at a prior meeting a little bit about individual. What is an individual? Can it be an entity? Can it be a municipality? Right? So I want to press this further because we've had these discussions on campus. Every single word that I'm aware of in Salish for water, whether stream, river, or groundwater, connotes personhood.
Okay.
It's usually feminine, and there are tribal members here, so you guys correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the word for lake, for instance, is essentially the same word that we would use for grandmother.
Okay.
So could there be instances where there is information about water itself that needs to be held private because it could have cultural uses, sacred uses that are unique to the tribes? And this kept rolling through my head when we had the last meeting, because that's information they may not, and rightly so, would not want to have disclosed. So is that something we need to be thinking
I
about?
would plead total ignorance to anything related to tribal law because I am not qualified to answer that question, but I think it's an absolutely relevant and perfect question to ask because we want to make sure that we are following the intent of both separate sets of laws and respecting what they're there for.
Well, to me, there's 10,000 years of history of these words and this language that protects water. And I see one of our primary roles is also trying to protect water, and that might mean protecting its privacy. But as a non-tribal member, I don't want to mess that up. And I just think it's something unique that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
that I want to deal with tremendous sensitivity.
Yeah, and we need to ask the people that are the experts.
Exactly.
I agree. So it's definitely worth having that discussion in consideration, maybe bringing people in to inform the board kind of how that looks from that lens. So you can make a decision proactively to make sure that you're on track.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. The other time that you can close a meeting is if you are in discussion that pertains to litigation, active litigation. Number 4. Meeting may be closed to discuss strategy to be followed with respect to litigation when an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public agency. Now, the subsection B says with caveat that is litigation against a private party. It's a public entity, city, county, state, feds. You have no expectation of privacy because they're both public entities. So you can't close a meeting for litigation strategy. Let's say you're suing the state.
But doesn't this all default back to the judgment of the presiding officer? Like,
Yes.
okay, so what if the presiding officer in some future board, so Clayton, if you're listening in, I'm not pointing a finger to you, because he knows way more about all of this stuff than I ever will. But if some future presiding officer made a decision to close a meeting and it was an incorrect decision, are the other board members culpable in that or liable? I don't know what the right word is.
So the challenge with this is that you guys have that immunity clause, right? And so I don't know how that plays into the procedural sentence, but let's say it's a standard typical local government board in the state. It is at the discretion of the chair, but I would say if the chair is doing that against advice of the council, then you probably shouldn't be doing it to start with. And if they close the meeting, here's where we have had ongoing discussion in our office, and I still don't know. We have our opinion, but again, we are not legal experts. Says you can close the meeting during the time that the discussion relates to the matter of individual privacy. It doesn't say the vote. So in that case, if you close the meeting, the chair closes the meeting for discussion. Sounds to us like you come back into the public meeting for the vote. So the public still has a chance to comment on the action. Let's say we're talking about the school board and they're trying to fire the coach and they go into closed session. They make the motion to terminate the coach's contract in the public meeting. So the public still has the right to comment on it, even though they didn't hear the discussion.
Okay. So would the caveat then be in our policy that the presiding officer cannot make a decision to close a meeting without prior consultation with legal counsel? Is that the caveat that has to be in place?
I don't like giving authority to legal counsel that's not been appointed to the board in the way that everybody else is.
But you just said that they need to consult their legal counsel before they go into a closed meeting.
They do.
I'm so confused right now.
So they need to consult the legal counsel, but I wouldn't give the counsel.
You wouldn't make it a policy.
Right, exactly, because it's still up to the chairperson.
I'm just a biologist. This is really not something I understand. So how do you protect the presiding officer or?
That's why you have insurance.
That's a whole nother.
That's a whole other thing.
So by making
I would say, don't go looking for lawsuits, but also don't not do your duty because you're afraid of a lawsuit, right? So if the presiding officer honestly believes this is the need for privacy substantially outweighs the need for public participation, and that's their good faith view, and somebody challenges it, so be it. You're gonna let the judicial system do what they do, but I wouldn't not close it because of those two constitutional rights. Let's say you close the meeting and then a court says, no, that should have been open. You can release the minutes, right? Because the minutes are kept separate for a closed meeting. They're under lock and key basically until they're released. You can release the minutes for the closed session and everybody can see the information. If you were to go the other way and you left it open when it should have been closed, you can't unring that. So that person's individual right to privacy is violated. You can't say, actually, just kidding, we weren't supposed to do that, so forget everything that you heard. Right. That's why it's so important to understand where that threshold is, that's super gray and moves all the time. And that's why I always defer to the attorneys, people that actually have it. Because they're the ones who are gonna have to stand up in the court and say, we did the right thing here.
But if you put it into the policy, you make them culpable. Which is why you don't write it down.
Yes,
If I'm
and
tracking this correctly.
so here's why I go to the policy, because that chairperson has been elected or appointed through whatever process you deem is publicly appropriate. And if you're saying that authority to make that decision rests with the attorney, not with
Oh, okay,
the chairperson, you're giving that authority.
gotcha. Now I'm with you. Okay, sorry.
No, these are really good discussions and questions to have, and you guys got some work. Because you're creating something that takes into account all of these different complexities.
And we've now discovered that you can't give your authority away in any direction.
Right, exactly. You're right.
So, which is good clarification for the board is the.
Okay. Minutes, how do you feel about minutes? You need to have date, time, place, list of the board members that were there. Substance of all matters proposed to discuss and decided. So it's not action item only, and it's not verbatim. It's somewhere in the middle. And
So-
yeah,
Excuse me, you made a comment before about when we're talking about closing a meeting and then you release the minutes that are taken during the closure.
sorry, that wasn't clear. You would release the minutes if the court required. So if you closed a meeting and you went through, did you pay, those minutes are kept separate, and then somebody challenged it and the court said, actually, that should have been open. That court order would open those minutes.
But if the minutes, if there's no action in the closed session, then it's just discussion. So to what degree of detail are we obligated to keep those minutes during a closed session?
Just like in open meetings, so 23212 defines our minutes for us. If you look at subsection 2C, the substance of all matters proposed, discussed, or decided. So just like if you're discussed acting, that order, any one of those three things, it needs to be to the level that if somebody who was not there in 20 years, they could pick up those minutes and understood what was discussed. And the person who does your minutes, they deserve an adult beverage. They are part, right? The people that do the minutes are incredibly talented, in my opinion, finding that balance between adding enough information that you know the substance of what was discussed, but not so much that it's overdone or that it has unnecessary. Yeah.
But all our meetings are recorded also.
They are, yep, and we talked about that a little bit, so you give people a chance to watch the whole meeting if they want. Where is? So the top of that 212, if an audio recording of a meeting is made and designated as official, the recording constitutes the official record. If an official record is made, a written record must also be made. So in your case, your written record is your official, right? So you don't have to have the recording, but you're doing that above and beyond. The only caution I have with the recording being out there is just make sure you're following the local government records retention. It sounds like you don't have any intention of disposing of them in the future anyway. So just be aware that the Schedule 8 is the local government record retention schedule for the state. And you want to make sure that you're following that for all the recording, or all the records written or. We good? How are we doing? Okay, what else do we need to just make sure we touch on? We talked about ethics a little bit. Nepotism is in here as well. And
Can I steal you away and
please,
go back to a couple of other items? We
Yeah.
talked about the agenda, which was super helpful. We talked about how we really need to get everything on the agenda at least 48 hours in advance or work our way a little bit. What happens if we remove things from the agenda?
I'm not concerned about removing or postponing postponing so much because no action is taken. So you're not violating the right by taking an action without people being.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And what if we have to cancel a meeting because of snow, technology, attendance, forum, the whole array of things?
Yeah.
Is there a fair expectation from the public that we're gonna?
Not-
We're not gonna do anything.
You do your best to try to inform people, but again, you're really on the side of no action was taken, so no harm was done. Other than people might be angry because they go make runners down and they threat back and lizard. But they weren't harmed by lack of action.
Thanks, sorry to.
No, that's great.
Still you back to that, just a practical thing.
It reminded me though, so if you have to have this agenda and materials that go with it, essentially, all posted ahead of time, and I would, as part of the best practice, have the agenda where you have it. Also, put as many supporting documents that the board's going to see as possible, because the public is going to say that they should have access to the documents the board has, and they should, but in a reasonable amount of time that they can digest that before the meeting. So that when they come to do public comment, they are informed of the same information. Okay. And that doesn't mean if you get a last minute addition to your board packet that there's no way that you can act. Just try to do your best on that. But the agenda needs to stay once it's posted. So if you have to have that posted 48 hours ahead of time, it may be worth thinking about, and this might be an internal office thing, but if we have to have it posted 48 hours ahead of time, we need everything submitted and ready to go a day before. You don't want to be in a situation where the person that's posting is constantly running up against that deadline because somebody's trying to add one up. Just be thoughtful about what that looks like in practical application for people that are trying to do stuff.
Why do some boards have like a week before?
Why do they?
Yeah.
They put that limitation on themselves. So they don't have to, but it could be a response to criticism in the past that they weren't open up. Or they could just say, well, that feels like it's an appropriate amount of time. They also may not have a whole lot they deal with. So they might have the opportunity to have that kind of space where it's not pre-planned in the last. You can always make that by policy, make that timeline longer. You just can't do less.
Certainly, the pressure that we receive is not so much have things posted longer, but to hurry up and move things faster, which is a different level of pressure that we're trying to balance.
Yeah, and it's tough, and you'll see that with the municipalities all the time with developers. And rightfully so, this is their livelihood, they're trying to get things through. But we will not sacrifice our rights for the convenience of somebody who's asking for application. Because it always comes back to, and that's what we have a lot of discussion when we do these board trainings. Yeah, it kind of can be a pain sometimes to follow all these things, but they're there for a reason, not just to make your life harder. They're there to protect the rights of everybody. Okay, let's take a quick look at the right side. We do not spend nearly as much time in here, but R1 is our guiding principles for good governance.
I'm sorry,
No.
the right side. For public comment, we have this method that you've seen here. But what is, could you touch a little bit on something that you told me on the phone about having an avenue for people to provide written comment, which I think may be important.
Yeah, so they have the opportunity to comment either in person by electronic means, if they have that option, or they can write their comment down and submit it to the board. Be careful with written comments. You'll sometimes see if there's a really fiery topic, somebody will have 30-page they submit to the board. If they submit that to the board 10 minutes before the board meeting, I would urge you to think about delaying that decision until the next meeting. Because let's say that you decided in a way that they didn't agree with, whatever your decision was. They could potentially turn around and say to the court, I had heard information. They didn't have time to review and digest it because I gave it to them 10 minutes before we started. There's no way they read that information. Yep, you're right. So it's better to postpone that decision for 2 weeks or a month. Have time to review that and make that decision informed with that information, than to have to go back and redo it or undo it, because they now have a claim that the courts are gonna say, yeah, you're right. They didn't have time to look at that, so they didn't consider it.
Will you, speak to the option of limiting?
Yeah, sure. So. You can by policy if you want. This is in the right side, we have. The sample rules and procedure for a water sewer district. On page R3, we start there. The one thing that we don't have in here, and I don't know why, is limiting public comment. But if you look at page R7, we have a guide for public participation. So it helps the public understand when and how they engage with the board. And I would add on there, you could add a number 6 and say. All public comment is limited to 3 minutes or 5 minutes per person per topic. You can do that as long as less than 3 minutes, as long as it is clearly and evenly applied every time you have public comment. If you have public comment on all the other agenda items and you let people go as long as they want, it's 7 minutes, 12 minutes, 4 minutes. And then you get to this really contentious topic and you're limiting everybody to 3 minutes. They're gonna say, well, that's not consistent with what you just did. You gotta remember. So you can limit public comment, putting in here the public comments limited to 3 minutes and 5 minutes, but then make sure that you have that every time. City of Kalispell, maybe like, yeah, I think like up at their, where the council sit, they have a timer that sits up there. I think they're the ones that have one of the little sand timers. So 3 minutes and they just flip it every time somebody comes up. When sand runs out, you're done. Some people have digital clocks that count down. I will make it so that the person who's commenting can see that time so that they know how much time they have left. But that is a way that everybody is clear that it's equal for everyone.
What
Yeah.
about, I've seen where, individuals will get up and say, I'm allotting my 3 minutes to this person.
Yeah.
Can they really do that?
Yes, so this happened. I used to live in Belgrade and we had a subdivision that we moved into, we bought a house, brand new subdivision. After the first 2 phases were done, so approximately 50 homes were bought. The developer proposed a new phase, which would be, and these are quarter acre lots and 2,000. Developer wanted to add a 108 unit apartment complex in our subdivision. Did not go over super well with people that just moved there specifically for this single home type environment. So we packed the city council and we were all in. And city council saw us all there. They're like, oh boy, he said, we have a proposal. Instead of each one of us getting up and taking our 3 minutes, can we just have one person represent our collective thoughts? We're going to give them 20. Can we do that? And the mayor did a really good job. He said, that's your right to give up, not mine. So I'm not gonna do that unless everybody in the room agrees. So do you all, everybody that's present, are you willing to trade your 3 minutes for this one person to represent you? Yep, we're all good with that. So he had us basically vote. And that took the responsibility off of the chairman and gave it back to us. It's our right to give it, not theirs. So yeah, you did that.
Actually, there's a question on.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about how we record the written comments when we receive them or like emailed into us. Do we attach them to the agenda or can we like summarize them in the notes in some way, shape or form? Just attach them to the minutes. Okay, thank you.
Because the board is the one that is taking the public comment, not the other public members, right? So the other members of the public, if you have the opportunity, you think it's important, you could include it in the board packet, but you don't necessarily have to. Right, now,
But they have to be given in their entirety.
yes, yes. So
It
you can't
be
cherry pick.
Summarize or paraphrase, right?
Yeah, yeah, so I would just, as written, you include it as an attachment to minutes, because then you don't have that responsibility to try to capture what their intention is.
But you don't have to publish profanities or other,
No.
there is some edited.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. If you get to a situation where you have a whole bunch of profanity in written record, talk to your attorney about how you redact that without compromising the integrity of the comment, because we don't want to perpetuate. Work order.
I just had a quick question. We're about 2+ hours in. Would it be okay if we took like a 5-minute break? It's finals week for my students. And
Yes.
my phone is blowing up and they've got questions.
I
So
appreciate you calling that. It's terrible to take you over. Yeah, let's do that. We'll take a break. I just have a couple more things to touch on, and then I will wrap up so you guys can get on to everything else you're gonna do. Let's take 10 minutes. Does that work?
is that okay with everybody?
I think I have to do that.
Yep.
For the record, the board will be taking a 10-minute break.
Sorry, Ken. Mr. Chair, may we take?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
So now,
So what time are we going back? 3?
Okay.
So
Sorry, I
yes,
said-
that's the change that I
okay,
would make at this point.
and does that resolve your concerns, Kayla?
It would.
Oh, okay. So, Haley, can you make that change and represent it at our next meeting?
Yes, I can make that change. That was actually a typographical error. That can be changed and addressed for the next meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair, board members, if possible, could we agree to make this change and finalize this memo? We do have some pressing need to get this moved along for some other pieces of our Office of the Engineer puzzle to move forward. And I don't want to be hasty here, but if that's possible, please do consider
I'm not sure it's your suggestion.
that the board decide to adopt the memo with the change.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm suggesting. Very, like, please make this change, consider this to be done. We'll take off the draft label, we'll make the change, and it'll be a final adopted memo. Only if you're comfortable.
Does Melissa need more time to study the memorandum in its entirety? I'm glad Kayla identified what she identified, but should we have one more complete look at it?
If I am not your lawyer. So I can't provide you with legal advice. So it's up to the board if they, I mean, it was incumbent on me to give public comments. But not legal advice to the board. So it's up to the board how you want to proceed, but I cannot review it in a legal capacity on behalf of the board.
Mr. Chairman, one item within this policy that might be something we need to discuss is the quasi-governmental nature that it defines for the board, and that is a key element in moving forward with health insurance, for instance, for staff. So right now, because that's undefined, it's difficult for staff to, am I representing this correctly, Ethan, to navigate health insurance, which I'm sure they would all like to have. So that's part of the urgency here.
So are you identifying concern, or are you saying it's a reason to get this thing moving?
It's a reason, I'm just further explaining why we need to move along.
Okay, okay, thank you. Okay, is there any other public comment?
If you would like to leave a public comment, please raise your hand and I can make it possible for you to speak. Again, if you would like to leave public comment, please raise your hand and I'll make it possible for you to speak. Ken, I'm seeing no public comment.
Apparently, there's no public comment. I entertain a motion on this memo.
So I guess I'm just clarification, this is. If we were to approve this, then that would expedite other aspects of, and it clarifies our governmental status. It also provides the status with regard to the domain name and stuff like that, so then it's in our best interest to move this along, I guess. So with that, I guess then I will make a motion to approve this with the words and water right ownership updates deleted from the second paragraph on page 2.
And to publish it.
And to publish it.
You have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Georgia.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Yes, motion's carried. Thank you, Kayla, thank you, Melissa. The next one, 6.2, board funding level discussion. Really?
Yes, so again, this would be a similar board action. This memo is actually in its draft form and was provided to the board in its draft form. We were awaiting some information from the state regarding how its budget is line itemed for the board. We just received that information, and thank you, Ethan, for the really thorough information that would need to be added. So actually, this memo would not necessarily require board action. It would need to be updated with that information.
Okay, so no board action is required. No public comments required at this point.
I will field any commentary on it though. However, this is the same memo that was provided last week as well. No additional changes have been made to this memo since that discussion.
Question, Mr. Chairman. So then will this memorandum come back to us
Correct.
for action prior to publication?
Correct. Yep. Once that
Okay.
information has been added to this that Ethan provided me with, then it will be back in front of the board for board action for publication on the website.
Any other comments? For the board? Okay, we'll move on to 6.3, open meeting memo discussion. Kayla?
This would be similar to the jurisdiction and authority memo and requiring board action for publication to the website. This memo, again, is in its same capacity as the one from last week. However, there is a slight addition to the, and I apologize, I have the wrong memo in front of me. There's a slight change to the third and fourth paragraphs on the fourth page. We reorganized some of that and made it a little bit clearer in terms of executive meetings for the board, because that was a concern that the board brought up from the working session. And so again, this is a more comprehensive memo. It covers almost everything. And then the secondary piece that will be needed for board action is the quick guide that was discussed in the working session. However, we would like to have this memorandum approved from the board before addressing the quick guide.
Question by the board?
Haley, this is Georgia. Could you explain again, what is a quick guide? What you're referring to?
Sure. So in the working session that we held last Thursday, there was almost like a nutshell, 3-page guide to the essentials of open meeting laws and how that would affect the board. That we wanted to hold off on getting board approval from until we had approval of this entire comprehensive memorandum.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Has the board had a chance to review this memo?
Not what the changes, not my statement.
Mr. Chairman, I had a chance to read this last night, and it seems to closely reiterate the training that we received today in open meetings, so I have no problems with it as written. But if we need more time, that's fine with me too.
Does the board wish more time?
I guess it seems consistent with the presentation we were given.
So we have a motion to, oops, excuse me.
Not a motion.
Oh, looking to accept and publish this. Okay, thank you. Motion by Teresa,
I'll second.
second by Georgia. Any other discussion? Okay. Public comment?
If you would like to leave public comment, please raise your hand and I will make it possible for you to speak. Again, if you would like to leave public comment, just raise your hand and I will make it possible to speak. I am currently seeing no public comment.
Have no public comment. Motion by Teresa, second by Georgia, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion carried, thank you. Six point four, logo contract and artist release discussion. Haley, this is, it looks like it's completely redone from the last meeting we had.
Yes, so in your meeting packet, it should have been circulated. It's now retitled to the Flathead Reservation Water Management Board Intellectual Property and Design Acquisition Agreement. After the discussion with the board last week during the working session, it was taken under advisement to rework this agreement so that the board could have ownership of the designs that were submitted to the board from the artist Dan Holland. This agreement in its reworkings should hopefully do that for you. The reason why it has draft on there is because it was significantly reworked from last week. And so we wanted the board to just have that capacity to review it before its approval.
That's right.
Any public comments on this? Yes, oh, excuse me, the board.
So Haley, in reading this over, I have a question, maybe you could clarify for me. under page 2, item 2, item F under 2. It says transferee may reproduce the work in any form or forms consistent with the design sold by transferee. Shouldn't that be transfer or?
Yes, it looks like that should be changed to transfer, and that actually should not be sold. It should be transferred by.
Which one are you looking at?
That's better.
Any other comments by the board?
I guess my only comment is it's really important that we get this finalized. It's holding up the website, which is holding up the homepage, which is holding up the FAQ, which is our primary tool to combat some misinformation in the valley. So we need to get this done.
Thank you. Any public comment?
That's what was advertised.
If you would like to leave public comment, please raise your hand and I can make it possible for you to speak. Again, if you would like to make public comment, please raise your hand and I will make it possible for you to speak. I am seeing no public comment.
So we have no public comment. Would Jordan, you'd like to change your comment into a motion?
I'm not even sure how to word this motion. I need help. So Haley, we can't proceed with approving this without that language change that Roger picked up on, correct? Or can we motion to accept with that change?
Yes.
You want to make that motion, Roger?
All right, I'll make a motion to accept the document entitled Flathead Reservation Water Management Board Intellectual Property / Design Acquisition Agreement with the language revisions pertinent to section 2.f that we discussed in deliberations.
Motion approved and published by Robert.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I guess, I think we're not gonna publish it, we're just gonna move ahead with getting this signed now.
So motion to approve by Roger and second by George with Roger's changes. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Motion carried. Mr. Engineer, items. Your changes to the agenda.
Board members. Item 7 is the water engineer report as requested at the last meeting. I can tell you that the report for the office today is that we have a new water cooler. Every office needs a water cooler. Thank Mr. Frakes here for getting us going on the water cooler. Excellent work. We've had a lot of training. I'm pretty sure James is sick of hearing my voice.
On the water.
Yeah, around the water cooler, right? Yeah. Let's see, I'm still working on initiating the recruitment that you approved at the last meeting, but I've not lost sight of that. Had a busy morning here with a lot of water users and dealing with a few building issues as well. Things that we are working on to get in front of you, perhaps by your next meeting, if you choose to select the December 1st date, that's later in your agenda. But we are updating the domestic allowance form in hopes of moving things from your plate to my plate. That will help these meetings perhaps be a little more streamlined and possibly less regular. We are also working on a geothermal form so that people can apply for geothermal heating and cooling. And I'm thankful to have the assistance from the Montana DRC on trying to get things moving forward with our office receiving registrations. We all know how important that is. Get those registrations moving. So thank you for DNRCers here today that have been helping that along. That said, I'll stand for questions about operational updates if you have any. Otherwise, I can move on to a decision I'm going to ask. Questions?
Please proceed.
Excellent.
Oh, sorry, Ethan. It looks like Hallie has a comment.
More of just a question, and this could be, I don't know if my numbering on my draft agenda is actually off. I don't know if the FAQ for the engineer office is going to be discussed in this meeting at all. Just wanted to touch base on that from last week's meeting.
Board's permission, I can offer that I am still awaiting some feedback on the FAQ, and my understanding is that I needed to I wanted to hear from a few more folks and then see if we couldn't find some resolve on that. I don't believe that we were quite ready for this meeting. Was the last understanding that I had. Does that sound accurate from the board's perspective?
Haley, do you have questions though relative to it or comments?
I don't have any questions. I have some suggestions just for wording. I can present that now, or I can provide that in a comprehensive email. It's nothing major, but I'm happy to discuss now.
If left to me, I'll accept that in an email from you, Haley.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Oh, yep.
So I had comments on them too that I'll pass on to you, Ethan. I was going to bring it up under board member updates. I guess I think we should get this finalized also as soon as possible, because like Georgia says, we're trying to get the website up and running. This is exactly what we want to put on the website. One of the many things we want to put on the website, but we had last meeting, we had discussion about publishing this and putting it in a newspaper also, so, or some excerpts from it. So I think it's important to get this thing finalized. My comment.
Thank you. Excellent. And you did have specific comments, I believe.
Yeah, I'll give
Right. Yeah. Okay. Just to double check that those were some of the ones I was awaiting. So that's where we're at. Now, if the board will permit, I will move to the lovely topic of awnings. Outside, you may notice we have wire frames. We have no awnings. It's been a challenge to find some local folks to do our awnings. Mr. Frakes has reached out, however, and found Fabricon awning company who can come here. They have to pull the frames down, put the awnings on, put the frames back up. And that fee is $2,000, not to exceed $2,500. So I put to the board whether or not they'd like to consider taking an action on that. I did stick some public comment in here because I had the training, you know, didn't want to get in trouble, but I can't imagine that we would get a much better price for somebody having to come here, pull them all the way down, install them, put them all the way back up. We were headed towards blue because of the obvious. If the any board members want to interact on color choices, you're obviously welcome. But that's where we're at.
Mr. Engineer, in light of our business added to the agenda more than 40 hours.
The acting chairman, board members, it's not quite ideal. I do think it is kind of almost a ministerial activity personally, so maybe we'll take the risk that we won't have extreme outrage about the public not getting to comment on the addition of the awnings. It does seem like an important thing to keep the sidewalk cleaned up and free from ice and snow along the main part of the building.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I could just add, my husband and I are the ones who paid for the frames out there and the original awnings back, I don't want to mention how many years ago, and we paid more than this quote. So I don't know if that says something about our business acumen, but I think that's a really fair price. So
As did we, and additionally, there is a spot for a sign. This doesn't mean that we needed to, that's it. We assumed that a logo would eventually occur, and a name, the sign, and some lights on that center post. So that thematically will be phase 2 of building face uplift, if the board so.
And I would just add that if we do approve this, this is not to be considered precedent for approving other actions without the required 40 notice.
So very much understood.
If we need a motion, I would make a motion
1 second.
to support it.
We could need to ask for public comment.
Okay.
Is there any public comment?
If you would like to make public comment, please raise your hand and I can make it possible for you to speak. Again, if you would like to make public comment, please raise your hand and I can make it possible for you to speak. I am seeing no public comment.
Okay, we have no public comment. Use it.
Thank you. Sorry. I would make a motion to support the recommendation from the water engineer to purchase the awnings from Fibercon as part of the building upgrade and also for general safety reasons with the sidewalk.
A motion from Teresa.
Georgia seconded.
Georgia second. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, board members.
Motion's carried. Board member, or any other updates? Roger, you already sort of gave your board member update. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, do we, I understand the urgency of completing or finalizing the FAQs. Ethan, is that something that we can then put on our agenda for December 1st? Or will you, is that a reasonable timeframe?
Board members, it is certainly reasonable as long as I can get some, any feedback that needs to happen. Right now I am aware that we need to add an element to make clear that these meetings are the official meetings, which is something that the draft you currently have does not have. Thanks to Maya Rao, the DNRC, for making that comment. I also understand that we need to have 2 separate formats, one the long form and then another short that has, I believe it was 3 more isolated FAQs and a link to the larger section, because that would allow us to get publications out at a more reasonable expense. And then other comments as they come in will be incorporated. Again, I do encourage you to just send them directly to me, not to the entire board. So, and I will update that, get it on your agenda for the December 1st meeting.
Any other comments?
I just had a question or a clarification. Mr. Chair, am I correct in understanding that we plan on meeting the 1st and then every other week? So the next meeting would be on the 15th? Is that?
I don't know. We haven't discussed it.
Okay, because I'm out of town that second week of December, and I just thought I should let you know in case it was a quorum issue. We're heading into the holidays. Here we go.
Any other discussion on that point?
Would it be helpful to send out some sort of poll so that the board members could possibly put their availability through the holidays out there for us? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Board members, your FRWMB.org calendars are available for you to block out periods in which you are not available. Additionally, your engineer can share his calendar with you if you are so inclined to want to know what my holiday plans are. And otherwise be able to pin me down for specific meetings you'd like to assign.
Ethan, if I can make a suggestion on top of that, we can do like a shared team calendar where everybody can just like put in the dates that they'll be out or, you know, alternative information. And I can figure out how to set that up if that's something we're interested in.
Anna, please take action on that. I can do that without the board's.
Okay, great.
Other updates? Is there any public comment on any item on or not on the agenda?
I currently have no public on Zoom anymore, but it does look like Haley has.
We have no public comment. But do we have? Oh, okay. Hey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow board members. I wanted to, I was hoping to receive some clarification on the securities banking agreement with Glacier Bank. It was my understanding from the last meeting that there is a time, this is time sensitive. And with the next meeting potentially being December 1st, I was unsure if the deadline to provide a response to the bank was November 30 or 31, 30, November 30th. If that's the case, we have had a chance to review it and would advise the board enters into a resolution to essentially accept the agreement with Glacier Bank. I caught the tail end of your discussion regarding open meetings, which sounded like it went very well. And at the tail end, I heard her discussing transparency of the board. That was something that we had discussed earlier this morning as the board's attorneys. Was to, especially when going in and using funding of the board, to be transparent and have documentation of those approvals. And so a resolution would do that. If it is a time sensitive matter, that would potentially need to be something that's dealt with in a special meeting, which is why I bring it to the board now.
How soon will you know whether it's a time sensitive matter?
I'm unsure of what the deadline is. I believe Clayton may have had that, or Ethan. I'm unsure who has that deadline.
Mr. Engineer.
Board members, my understanding is that Chairman Matt was prepared to move that the agreement to this, what he considered to be largely administrative banking activity, but does require all the board, action. At that time, I do believe that our legal counsel requested a moment to take a look at the agreement. I am hearing our legal counsel say that they don't have a problem with the agreement. To me, it seems like the only thing that I knew that was a problem with entering into this TriStar agreement was is addressed, that we had to get,
Yeah, I kind of recall that discussion also, and that Clayton was ready to move forward, but then it was decided we should have it reviewed by legal. And as I recall too, there was no fees associated with that, and there is the time deadline, so I would suggest that we maybe reactivate item number 5.3 on the agenda and take action on it.
Take a motion, I think so.
No, yeah, yeah.
Take a motion, to reactivate 5.3.
Oh, and no, we're still in session, so I don't think
Okay,
it does.
Could I just, sorry, could I provide some clarity from the engineer's statement?
Sure.
In essence, yes, we agree that the securities contract is okay for the board to be entering. However, the board action we would feel more comfortable with the board action being done with it being the contract being accepted through a resolution of the board, which needs to be drafted.
So I guess we need to have a motion to empower our attorneys to draw up a resolution. Teresa makes this move. Look, we had
So can you clarify that for me? I mean, I think that we just wanted to have it looked at, and that if you thought it was, if there were no liabilities associated with it, then we were going to move forward. So can you reiterate your position on that after you based on your review?
Sure, well, certainly. Our review is that the agreement in itself is fine for the board to enter. However, we would recommend that the board have the board action through a resolution, so that it provides transparency about what the board is doing with its funding.
This is Teresa McDonald. I just have a question though. About the level of transparency or the need for the resolution. Isn't the transparency provided through the minutes? I'm just not understanding the need for the resolution.
Sure, it would most certainly be encompassed within the minutes. Resolutions, other public entities have published them on their website as well, so that the public can review the resolutions. They wouldn't necessarily be reviewing this agreement between the bank and the board, which is why we suggest having this resolution in place so that the public is knowing what is occurring with funding, because that could be a potential issue that could come up in the future. So just providing transparency and clarity to the public.
I think though, wasn't the whole basis for this thing just that the bank, based on our current status, the bank was offering a higher level of insurance for our account?
I can tell the board members what I understood from afar, which was that the account balance exceeded the FDIC insurable amount, and therefore the bank had suggested an alternate arrangement to add additional of the insurance, and I generally understood it to be a reorganization of funding.
Yeah, and there was no fee associated with that, so I think we should just move ahead with this. Yes, I'll make a motion that we move ahead with approving the chairman go ahead with the tri-party agreement with Glacier Bank.
I think we need to ask if there's any public comment.
Mr. Chairman, there is currently no public on this meeting,
Thank you.
but it looks like Haley has a comment.
In case anybody here wanted to speak as a member of the public, we might as well at least go through the formality.
The reason in bringing this up was to essentially get the deadline information. I did not have that from the last meeting, to see if it was a time sensitive requirement, to provide an answer to the bank. I think that this would maybe potentially need some more discussion, but I have provided the board with suggestions for a resolution, and that's what's before the board.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Roger to move forward on this. We have a second by Teresa. Any other discussion? I will, yes.
Chairman, I'd just like to make a comment. I sat on a board from a tribal corporation, and one of the issues that arose was the funds were frozen due to the fact that there was no resolution and there was some activity that occurred with regard to who had the access to those funds. Once that was, and there was criminal convictions involved. Once I was the board chairman, we passed a resolution that reassured the bank that the entire board was aware of who had the signing authority, and that everyone on the board was aware that this bank was the one that was conducting, that we were conducting the business with. So that's just, I just wanted to add that. And I think that maybe possibly where Haley may be coming from, it shows transparency to the bank.
Roger.
But we've already established that. Yeah, we did that when we opened the checking account. And the chairman and the co-chair are the signatories. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Or Vice Chairman. So, any other discussion? Thank you.
If I may, I would just like to clarify for notes. Roger just motioned to approve the tri-party Glacier Bank agreement with no resolution, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Teresa seconded that. Okay,
Thank
I will take individual votes this time. Georgia?
You're gonna start with me. Okay, aye.
Roger?
Yes.
Teresa?
Aye.
Ken? Aye. Motion carried. Thank you. Did we do public general comment, or we could circle back? We did public comment. Okay, is there any other further public comment about any items on or off the agenda?
I currently have nobody in the meeting.
There's no public comment. The next meeting, I'm seeing is being recommended for December 1st. What time? So I don't screw up again.
We were all confused.
Board members, what time works for you? As things get a little darker, maybe a slightly earlier start time is appropriate. I'm not certain. I certainly am here to serve the board. Our 2 to 4 slot could be 1:30 to 3:30 slot. Is that something that's more desirable from the board members, or we just keep the standard 2 to 4 slot? There's no trainings. No trainings, no extra long meeting at the on the 1st for you.
For me, I would like to avoid shading up in the dark.
Okay, does 1:30 to 3:30 achieve that?
Yes.
Okay.
I just add, that works for me through December, but I need to look at my January through March teaching schedule. That might pose a conflict with the class once school resumes. Sorry,
No
I
problem.
don't like that in the dark either.
Fine. Teresa,
I'm flexible.
okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you,
Board
board
members,
members.
1:30 on December 1st.
1:30 on December 3rd, first, excuse me. Try not to write that wrong in the email.
Is there any other items that we wish to talk about?
No, it's not. Animals, yes, yes, I saw that too. Yeah.
But there is a great tableau.
That's true.
So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Before we end, I wanted to touch base. I know that last meeting we talked about Christmas card picture with the board and staff. Obviously you're missing some staff today. And apparently we also are missing Chairman Matt. So I was going to suggest we postpone this image, or we could do something hybrid. I could come up with a clever idea, but generally speaking, I'd like to just postpone and we'll talk about it next meeting or something.
Should just be staff.
Just staff.
Yeah, just staff.
Okay, I will touch base with staff then, if that's what the
Like
board.
Christmas tree
Yeah.
with Santa hats on.
Okay. Having said that, I'll accept the motion, entertain the motion to adjourn. Motion by Teresa,
Second.
second by Georgia, all in favor.
Aye.
Motion adjourned. Thank you all for the long time.
Ethan, thank you for the training.
Yes, that was
a
really
wonderful
great.
suggestion.